Yeah. Lovely. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again today on Charisma Talks, episode number 4. I can't believe it. They are going very quickly. And today I've got an amazingly special guest, Maria Kelly, a leadership coach. I will let her tell you a little bit more about herself in a second. But Maria, so glad to have you here from sunny Barcelona. Is that correct?
Thank you. Yes, sunny and very hot Barcelona. We had 38 degrees here yesterday. So, yes,
Wow.
but not complaining. That's why I moved here.
You know, in Manchester, we had about 21 degrees yesterday. So if that can tempt you, we've got a little bit of cloud today as well, a little bit of coverage. Um, Maria, could you please give everyone just a little bit of an intro in terms of who you are, what you do, and who you help?
Okay, so I'm a leadership coach, as you said. I work with businesses and individuals. I help people. So I do several things. I work mainly with leaders, and that would be helping them step into their new role, helping them change company, maybe, if they're not unhappy in their current position. And then I will also work with groups of leaders to help them align, companies to help them align their leadership teams together. But then I also do some career coaching. People approached me at the end of last year. There was a lot of people being laid off. And I think, with the pandemic, people rethought what's important to them in life and work-wise in particular. And so with these different layoffs happening, people have been coming to me saying, "Hey, I'm not sure, what I want to do in the future. I think, would you be open to doing career coaching?" So I started doing that at the end of last year too, and that's been pretty successful. And myself, I'm from a corporate background. I spent 22 years working for Sotheby's, the auction house.
Wow.
I was very fortunate. I worked for them in Geneva, London, and New York. So I got to travel the world. And I was myself leading global teams. And so I have that experience, the life experience, that I'm coaching the people on what I've myself had to learn the hard way sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's also one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing, because it wasn't always easy for me going through my career. There were some moments where I felt very alone, very isolated, and didn't get much support. And I just felt it was really unfair to me, the leader, but also to the people I was leading, because obviously I made lots of mistakes, and I felt like this is not right. So when I decided to start my own business, I thought that's what I want to do. I want to help people to not have to go through what I went through, and support them to make sure that they get to create a career they love and enjoy what they do. I think you owe it to yourself to have a job you enjoy. And being a leader, I think it's even more important that you love what you're doing and that you enjoy it, because it reflects on all the people that work for you and work with you.
Yes.
So that's why it's important for me to help these people be their best selves and be the best leaders they can be.
Amazing. Yeah, well, fantastic. It sounds like you've come from a lot of different life experience there, and you're now able to share that with other people in a very meaningful way. So I guess the conversation that we're going to have today is around aligned teams and how communication can help that happen. So this idea of having an aligned team was something a little bit new to me. I don't have a team myself, so maybe I've not kind of got to that level yet. But before we jump in, can you give us a bit of an explanation of what you mean by an aligned team and how that looks versus a team that isn't aligned?
Yeah. Well, you talked communication, obviously, is your thing. And I think it's one of the most important thing everywhere, but at work in particular, especially with teams. When you're leading teams, communication is the thing that can make or break it. If you're good at communicating, you can really get the best out of people. But if you're really bad, you can really you can really mess it up big time.
Yep.
And an aligned team is basically everybody pulling in the same direction. It's a team that's clear on what the vision is. It's a team that's clear on what the objectives, the goals, how you're expected to work together, how you're expected to communicate together. It's in sports, if a team is not aligned, you can see it very quickly. If you're looking at a football match, if the guys are not playing as a team, you will see that. It's the same
Yeah.
thing it's the same thing at work. If everybody's not pulling in the same direction, balls get dropped, things get, goals get missed, and
Yeah.
and that's why it's important to have aligned teams that trust each other, that communicate well together, that support each other, and they're not competing against each other, because I've seen a lot
Mm.
of that, and that's often due to the way organizations set up incentives within the company. There are companies, well, especially I would say in sales departments, organizations that focus principally on that.
Yeah.
People are often given targets, individual targets, and not team targets, which
Mm.
means that they end up competing against their own colleagues, and
Well,
that doesn't help
yeah.
people work together.
I guess, I mean, it would be interesting to kind of hear the other side of that, and where that competition is needed to push. But I won't take us down that avenue just yet,
Yeah,
because I wanted
absolutely.
to I wanted to say, firstly, I'm sure there's lots of people listening who are nodding their head, going, "Yeah, I've been in exactly that situation where I've been either leading or in a team, and it's not been aligned. People pulling in different directions, lack of
Mm,
communication.
mm,
It's a huge, widespread problem,
mm.
and like you said, Maria, communication is often both the cause and the solution of that problem.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, I want to kind of take people through, and I guess before I do that, if you are watching on LinkedIn, please drop us a hello. And if you have any questions for Maria, drop them in the chat and we will get to them live. And I'm going to kick us off by starting with an example of someone who is already leading a team. And so I wanted to get your kind of initial thoughts, Maria, tips, advice. If you are that person in charge and you are trying to set the tone for everyone else, and you are trying to get everyone rowing in the same direction, what would be some kind of broad bits of advice that you would give in terms of the communication?
So leadership is all about leading by example, and for me, that's a huge one. You can't ask people to do what you're not demonstrating, and the behaviors you want to see a leader, show in communication wise. It's about being. It has to be transparent. You have to be. You're being attacked.
Sorry, just been attacked by a
I
fly.
could see it. I
I'm in a
could see it
I'm in a
going
huge
around.
office space, and this fly has decided to come and bother me.
It's Murphy's law.
Do apologize, mate. Please continue, as you were saying.
So you want your team to communicate clearly, transparently, concisely, and all these things. You need to model these behaviors, and it has to be consistent. Also, you can't meet, speak once a month, and hope everybody's going to be on board and know what's going on. The thing I used to get when I was taking over a new team, I would sit down with each member of the team and spend an hour chatting with them to find out, learn about them, find out their challenges, find out how I could support them, and then I would set up weekly meetings with my direct reports. And funnily enough, I got some resistance from some senior leaders at the time. These were senior leaders who were like, I never did weekly meetings. Why do you want to do this? Do you want to check in on me? It's about, being the police and all. I was like, no, it's about making sure, you have what you need, how I could help you. And people at first were like, we don't need, like, we see each other all the time. Like, you're sitting down. If I need something, I'll come to you. And people have this conception that if you're sitting like in an open space, we speak all the time, it's fine. But that's not the communication you need to be having, because you won't be speaking about the things that matter, or you won't be focused on specific things. And I think it's really important to carve out time with your team, with your individual reports regularly, and have a clear understanding of what these meetings are going to be about, have a structure around it, and communicate um, regularly a lot, and be very open about it. I don't think you can over communicate. And often things get done wrong or get missed, or mistakes happen because of lack of communication, because of miscommunication. And I think the biggest culprit is probably emails, where people, I mean, now there's WhatsApp and all these other things, but, written communication can often be very misleading, because people write very quickly, and you miss maybe the, what would I say, the details that might be
Yeah,
given to you when you're speaking face to face. And
sure. Yeah, yeah.
so for me, I think that the really important thing you should do if you're leading a team is you should be meeting with them. You should be leading by example what you want communication to be, because by doing this, I started doing this with my leaders and they started doing it with their teams. And funnily enough, the day this was when I was in New York, the day I was moving then to London, the guy who was totally resistant to our face-to-face meetings at first came to me before I left and said, you know what, I want to tell you, I'm really going to miss those meetings. I really enjoyed them. And I was shocked, because I always felt like I was dragging him into these meetings, but actually he enjoyed them. And in the end, he really saw the value of them. So you have to communicate.
So you said a lot of amazing things there, Maria. Just to kind of reiterate a few, it's that leading by example thing. Be the change that you wish to see. It's about having consistency and a bit of a pattern and a structure to when you're communicating, not just the blooming, the coffee chats, but really sitting down with a structure to what you're going to say. And then that last one about the kind of resistance factor. I think this is so important, because if you are a leader and you're trying to do something different and you're trying to make a change in the organization, you have to expect that there's going to be some resistance. You have to expect that people might not be on board straight away, and you have to persevere and keep going until those people turn around and realize that this is the right thing to do. So you can't be swayed in the breeze by every little bit of feedback that's good or bad. You have to set the course and stick with it for long enough to make it stick. Yeah, really, really good advice. I wanted to switch gears slightly though and ask you now about new leaders. So this is a dynamic a lot of people find themselves in, where maybe they've stepped up for the first time. Suddenly they've got a team of people looking at them and they're not sure exactly how they should behave, what their responsibilities are. Maybe they've never had any kind of responsibility or leadership before that. And it can be very daunting. And a lot of people, either they don't take that step because they're worried about it, or they take the step and then they kind of are not sure how to respond. So in a similar way, what would your kind of broad advice be for that new leadership communication?
Yeah, I was actually in that situation where I found myself overnight, and no kidding, it was overnight, leading a country, the business of the country, and 30 people. And I never really managed people up to then officially. I mean, I was always a bit of a natural leader, but I hadn't officially managed people, and I was managing people that were older than me, which was also, I was very young at the time. I was a woman. And so all these things were pretty scary. And I had some bad leadership examples in my first job. And I was terrorized that I didn't want to be that kind of person. I didn't want to be that bad leader that micromanages, that does all these things. But at the same time, I didn't have any role model or example that I could look up to, who I could model their behavior and think that's how I want to do it. So I was very isolated because my management was in London. I was on my own at my level in the company, in the country. So I had nobody I could ask questions from. When my boss would call me from London, I'd be like, I'm not sure I'm doing everything I should. Am I missing anything? And he'd be like, you're doing great. So that's not
Great advice. Yeah, thank you.
I know he
Yeah.
meant well. I know he meant well, but it wasn't helpful feedback, because I hung up and thinking, but does he even know what I'm doing? And I felt like for a year, I felt like I was walking around with piles of plates on my head, on my hands, and that one was going to slip and everything was going to come crashing around me. So it was very stressful. And obviously I did make mistakes, with people mistakes, because I never had any management training. So I did my best with what I had, but yeah, I wasn't given any feedback training. So that's basically one of the things you should be doing daily with people, is sitting down with them and giving them feedback on what they're doing, how they're doing at work. And I never learned how to do it properly. So yes, I did it wrong. I made mistakes. And at that level, the problem is when you make mistakes, it's people mistakes. So it has an impact on these people, on their, their job, their day to day, or maybe even on their career. And so those were the mistakes that really stuck with me afterwards, because I felt, oh God, if I'd known these things when I finally had some training a few years later, I was
Yeah.
like, oh my God, if somebody told me these things, it would have been so helpful. So I think new managers, you need to ask for help. I was also very proud. So, they just named me. I was a young woman in that position. And so I was like, I'm expected. I just felt like I was expected to know what I was doing and that I just had to do it. And so I didn't really, I mean, I asked my boss, but I didn't ask anybody else for help. It didn't even occur to me that I could, maybe find a coach or find somebody in another organization or a friend or some. So my advice for people who are in that situation, if you find yourself promoted to that kind of position and you're not being given the support you feel you need, go and ask for help. If it's not within your organization, go to HR. I didn't go to HR. I didn't go and say, hey, I think I need some management training. I didn't ask for these things. So go to HR, go to your boss. If the company's doing it, try and find a way of educating yourself, buy books. Now you can learn everything on YouTube. Find a coach, find a mentor, find somebody from another company that's gone through what you've gone through, and find somebody you can speak to, because it can be very lonely and isolating at the top when you're on your own. And yeah, I learned it the hard way. So
Yeah, it sounds like it. If anyone's watching and you have experienced this, let us know in the chat whether you've ever felt that kind of isolation from being in a leadership role, whether you've not asked for help, or whether you have and maybe that's helped. I think it gets to a bigger problem, this, Maria, of we are not taught how to communicate at all.
yeah, exactly.
We go through school, we go through college, we go through university, if that's what you do. And really, very few people are taught this is how you are supposed to communicate and lead other people. And I feel like it's a huge missing gap. And a lot of people I encounter get to a leadership position, and then suddenly they realize that they have to do these things and they don't feel capable.
Yeah.
And that's where the imposter syndrome often comes, because then they feel like, well, everyone's looking at me, everyone's expecting me to be the leader. I've got this kind of badge now, and I feel like I have to be a certain way, and I don't feel like I know what to do. So yeah, asking for help is great. I think a lot of people sometimes feel like they shouldn't have to, and that they are maybe embarrassed about that. I guess, you do just have to find the right people and not feel afraid to ask for help. Even when I had terrible anxiety back in the day, in a slightly different example, but I didn't ask for help for years. I just felt like it was a personal failing, and I just tried to bottle it up and hold it in myself, and it didn't help one bit. So yeah, it's a much broader rule of life that you have to ask for help if you need it. But it does get difficult when you feel like you've already reached a level where you should know how to do these things. So yeah, there's a broader problem there. Finally, what about people who are just in the team? They're not in the leadership role, they're not trying to manage people, but they want to try to build their team and get everyone aligned, for the greater good anyway, and they want to do their part in that process. What would your advice be, or any kind of tips for colleagues in a team?
I think be helpful. I wouldn't underestimate the value of being helpful and available to help others. If you're somebody that's always ready to reach out, support your colleagues, and even if it's not your job, even if it's not your department, but be there to help as much as you can, you'll quickly become the go-to person. You quickly become the person that everybody goes to for everything. And that builds your reputation. It builds, the trust the company will have in you and your colleagues. So people don't talk about that, but being the person who's always helpful, who's always there to support others, and that people know they can come to, is hugely valuable and will really help with your career.
Yeah, and it gets to a quote that I remember hearing, which I'm not going to get right, but essentially the meaning is opportunity lies where responsibility has been abdicated.
Yeah.
And that can be in very small things, where maybe in the team, someone isn't bothering to do this little task over here, or no one has sorted this out, no one's prepared for that thing. And if you can be the person who steps up and says, I'll do that of my own accord, I will take that responsibility. As Tony Robbins says, when you take responsibility, you gain the ability to respond, which is a great little switch that I love. So yeah, being helpful, taking responsibility are all great things.
And being open to opportunities. I mean, I had the career I had. I was never in my mind planning to have like a career. For me, it was like, I just need a job that I'm happy, that pays my bills. That's all I want. And I was just open to opportunities. And I made it known. That's another thing. You need to
Mm,
talk about communication. Um, I was speaking with a client the other day who sent me a message about she wanted something, and I said, "Well, have you told them that you want this? Are you waiting for them to give it to you? Because if you don't tell people what you want, they can't read your mind. Your boss doesn't read your mind, and they have
yeah,
loads of other things to think about. So
yeah,
if you want something, if you're ready to take on more responsibility, if you're ready to grow, if you want a promotion, if you want these things, you need to tell the person who's in charge of that or has the power to make that happen. Because to sit around hoping they're going to notice all your great work and think, oh, I'm going to give her a promotion, that doesn't always happen. And I think women have to be even more vocal than men about this, because men will go and say it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you need to tell people, make sure they know what you want, and then ask for it. Ask for, the opportunity. Ask for, I had a moment where I'd been managing the Swiss business for a few years, and I felt like I'm a bit bored. I can do this with my hand, one hand and my eyes closed. And I called my boss in London. I said, hey, if you have any projects or stuff you'd like me to work on, I'd be happy to help. And he was like, actually, we have this huge thing coming up. Could you help us in
Wow,
Amsterdam? And I
wow.
ended up working 3 days a week in Amsterdam while still managing Switzerland, helping them turn around the business, which was great. I really enjoyed it.
Mm,
But then, because I was doing that there, I got noticed by the head of Americas, who happened to be out there for a sale, and we met. And he
mm.
saw me and he said, "Oh, she's doing all this." And a year later, he called me, said, "Can you come to New York?" And I was like, "What for?" And he was like, "I just wanted you to come to New York." I was like, "Okay, but what for?" He said, "Okay, stop asking questions and hear me that I'm offering you a job in New York." And I was like, "What?" And so he offered me to take over a huge division in New York.
Wow.
And that was because I said to my boss, I want to, I can help to do things. Ended up in
Mhm.
Amsterdam, met him there, I mean, so it shows you that, if you're open to things, things come your way.
I think there's a nuance to how you asked there, though, Maria, because
Yes,
rather than going to your boss and just saying, "I
I
want,
want to.
I
Yeah,
want something," you
yeah,
were saying, "Can I give?
yeah,
What
exactly. I
problem
was
can
like,
I
what can
solve
I do
for
to
you?"
help? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so just the way we phrase things sometimes can make such a big difference. If you're always the person who is coming with problems or requests, that it doesn't paint the best picture. But if you're always the person who is coming with solutions and coming with offers and help, like you
Yeah.
said before, that it starts to make a positive association where people want to give you more responsibility, they want to give you more work, they want to increase you. So yes, yeah, all good stuff. One of the things that stops people though, from making that ask, from picking up the phone to their boss, is the lack of confidence.
Yeah.
Maybe they have the skills, maybe they've been doing a great job, but internally they don't feel like they deserve it or are ready for it or could do it. So it doesn't sound like you had that problem too much, Maria. You were kind of pretty front footed, you were going for it, and you were kind of had a good balance of confidence as well as skill set. What would you say to people who just feel held back by a lack of self-belief?
I wasn't always confident, and just so you know, up to that trip to New York, until I moved to New York, even though I was managing a country, even though I was managing at a high level, I was terrified of speaking in public. I could not.
Wow.
So I was working in an industry where it was very, we were facing the public, facing clients, and facing my team, speaking in front of my teams, things like that, not a problem. But going out and speaking to a journalist or in front of a whole group of people or clients, a whole group of clients, I was like, no way, that's not going to happen. And I was in an industry where lots of people actually loved doing that and wanted to put themselves forward. So it was very easy for me to say, "Oh, why don't you do this interview, or why don't you?" So for years, I
Yeah.
managed to dodge it and like, "Oh, I don't need the spotlight. Others are more interested, and I let them go for it." Like being very generous.
Oh,
But
yes,
actually, I
very.
was terrorized of being asked to speak in front of people. And when I moved to New York, I told my boss that, and after in a we had a big meeting with all the directors, and he announced that we were going to do a retreat for a couple of days with all the chairman, the boards, and the directors from the world globally coming together in one place.
Wow.
And he
Yeah.
said, and we're going to have workshops and presentations, and these are the people who are going to lead these different workshops. And my name comes up, and I'm like,
Oh,
I don't think so. So
yeah.
I go to him afterwards. I say, hey, I think you forgot, that I told you that I don't really do public speaking. So if it's okay, I'll let Marcus do this one. And he looked at me and said, no, you're doing it. And I was like, okay. So
Yeah.
I had no choice. I basically had to get my stuff together, and the first 5 minutes I had to speak in front of all those chairmen and board of directors and everything. I think my whole body was shaking so much. I thought I was going to die.
Oh,
And then
gosh.
I got through it and I survived. And I was like, oh, so actually it's maybe not as bad as I thought it
Mm,
was. But then I realized that I'd have to do it. So
mm,
then I volunteered for any opportunity I could within the company to speak in front of new employees, in front of interns, in front of clients, whatever. I said, if you need someone to speak, I'll do it, just to be able to build up that confidence. So my advice to somebody who lacks confidence, I think public speaking is a great way of building confidence. It would be that's one of the ways, because it really helped me feel more confident, sort of myself, when I was speaking in front of people. And yeah, these are little things that might seem completely unrelated, but when you build your confidence in one area, it just sort of shines everywhere. And
yeah.
so that's what helped me. So even though I was confident in my competences and skills, I knew I could do the job, I wasn't confident in me as a person presenting myself to others. I still had huge imposter syndrome. And doing that, speaking gradually in front of, so I took little steps, nothing too risky. I spoke in front of the new employees. I was like, well, they're new, I've been around forever. Like, but even though it was still scary. And then, gradually I built up, and then I spoke in front of, clients and things like this. But it's about starting small, doing little things that scare you, stepping outside of your comfort zone. So if there's things that are scaring you and that that you're staying away from, maybe those are things you should be doing. So
Yeah.
you don't need to go tomorrow and do the huge thing, but start little, do little things, and build up that bank of evidence that you can do it and that you're capable.
Mm,
Everybody can do it, but you just need to find the little proofs to tell you, you see, it wasn't that bad, and I can do
yes.
it. And so maybe I'll try a bigger group. And it's just about pushing yourself a little bit every day. And then you get to a
Yeah.
point like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. This is
Yeah.
incredible.
I could not have put it any better than that, Maria. Yeah, there's a couple of things I wanted to just highlight from what you've just said before we wrap up. Firstly, the fact that your leader pushed you into it. And that is a sign of great leadership, to know when to push and when to not push, because another person might have been pushed into that and had a bad experience, and they might have been set back in their confidence. So it's really important to know, both yourself and the people around you, when you should say, right, you are doing this, no ifs, no buts, get in there and do it, because you know it's going to help them, or when to maybe not push one in the deep end quite so quickly.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right about the gradual desensitization as well. Finding those small steps, slowly building it up, that is absolutely the way to do it. And I love the metaphor of the building up the evidence, because that is so key. And there's a lot we could go into here again with that. A lot of the time what happens is we don't focus on the positive evidence, we focus on all of the negative evidence, even if that might be lesser. And it's a psychological problem that people get stuck in. But
The way our brain
Maria,
is wired. It's wired to focus on the
yeah,
negative, because it's like the fight or flight. It's like saving our
yes,
lives. But we're no longer in those situations. So what's the
we
worst
have
that could
to.
happen? I always ask myself, okay, what's the worst that could happen? And you realize very quickly that what you're imagining in your brain is never as bad as what
Yes.
really happens.
Yes, the catastrophization is one that we have to avoid. It's very easy to let our imaginations run away with us.
Yeah.
But Maria, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on today. We're going to wrap up at past, just to be respectful of your time and anyone watching. Before we do, though, where can people find you? Who should be connecting with you? Who would you like to connect with? Give us your little pitch at the end. If someone's listening and they think, I love what Maria said, what can they do to get in touch?
Well, I'm active on LinkedIn every day. So if you want to find me, my handle is Ask Maria Kelly. And I want to connect with organizations who care for their leaders and care for their people, and who want to do the best to give them the support to lead in the right way. So if you have an organization and want to give your leaders the tools and the techniques they need to be good leaders and to be able to work together as a team and bring your organization the results they deserve, well, reach out to me on LinkedIn.
I think they'd be hard pressed to find anyone with quite the broad career background and experience that you've had, Maria. So yeah, definitely get in touch and follow Maria on LinkedIn if you haven't already. If you're watching on YouTube as well, Maria's website will be in the show description below. Maria, thank you so much for coming on and talking about how to align teams through impactful communication. Hopefully we've helped in one little way to do that today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Ed.
Okay, bye everyone. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.
Bye.